Hello everybody, I'm Marco Iannitto. I'm the founder of Untitled Consulting, and we help businesses to scale up and grow overseas and fixing their operational issues. Today we're going to talk about risk management, how to build a path to growth, and how to have a proactive approach when scaling comes in place. I come from the automotive industry. I had the privilege of leading some of the teams that have developed very unique cars in the world, first with Ferrari and later with Bugatti Rimac. And I'm been using this kind of expertise and experience to help businesses grow overseas. So today I want to talk about risk management, and specifically I want to discuss how to turn risk into structure, what happens when growth breaks what works, and what are the costs of quick fixes. When I approach a new project with a client, I like to follow one of the advice that comes from my mentor in Ferrari. That is, if you have to eat an elephant, you should split it in pieces and eat one bit at a time. That's exactly what I like to do when it comes to risk management, and that's why I think it's very easy to understand how to manage risk if we split it in three different parts: structural risk, human risk, and strategic risk. Let's analyze each of these risks by one and see what are they made of. I like to identify for each risk three key pillars that actually build up the whole strategy of scaling. Under structural risk, we can identify these three pillars. They are foundation, that is the readiness of the business to scale and the financial, let's say, or cash flow. Operation, that is how repeatable are my operations. And scalability, that is the intrinsic capacity to grow. Under strategic risk, instead, we are addressing the problem of scaling the wrong thing burns time and money. Under this risk, we can identify three other major pillars that instead are the product market fit. That is, are we actually scaling something that is needed by the market? Competitiveness, that is, how are we positioned against the other players in the market? And then sales and marketing, that is instead, how are we positioned in the market that we want to enter? The last risk instead is the human risk. Yes, that answer instead the problem of your people will break before your systems do. And under these risks, there are three major pillars. Are instead the team, that is how hard it is to actually scale the people that are building your business. The customer experience, that is, can we actually take care of all the customer, increased volume of customer clients that come with increased volume of operations from start to end? Do we have a customer service system? Do we have system to retain our customer and clients? And then last but not least, of course, is quality. That is, how can we keep the standards of our operations and product even when we scale our volume. The RISE framework, where RISE stands for Roadmap of Implementation, Scalability and Efficiency, was built exactly to allow business owners to navigate through risk management throughout the scaling process. And the idea is very simple, is once again slicing the elephant in pieces. So starting from the risks, we identify the underlying pillars, and for each pillar we then find what are the targets that are important for our business. So for instance, if we are building a product, we might have a certain quality standard that we want to achieve. If you are a media agency, we might have a certain customer rate acquisition. So we identify the targets that we want to achieve, and then for each target, then we can identify the tasks. Tasks are nothing more than a to-do list. So what do we need to do to achieve those targets? Now, once we have these tasks, then we can deploy these tasks in a timeline and build what is called a real scale-up program and ramp-up plan. So a plan and a program needs to have clear milestones and KPIs. So we want to make sure that while we progress with our program, we monitor the completion of our tasks, and therefore we can monitor the progress of our project. So I would like to then share with you a real life story once again, unfortunately not an unsuccessful story, to highlight how the RISE framework can actually help the scale-up process. WowEV was a very interesting company that was building a small vehicle, electric vehicle. It was a cart for resorts. And I'm using once again the car and the automotive industry because I feel that with its complexity, it resonates with many different businesses. Now, what happened to WowEV? They started with an interesting project and had some traction. They started selling a few units of their car. And suddenly they had an order of 1,000 units. So when this order came, they decided to invest a lot of money into scaling their production, trying to replicate the same production process that they were using when they were building just a few units. What happened to them? As they went on and they started buying tooling for their assembly line and started hiring people, they realized that actually the budget and time that they had forecasted for their project was not enough. So they kept investing and raising more money trying to keep up for the project, for the need for the project. And then eventually they had to sell the business because they couldn't keep up with the expenses. So once again, what happened to them? They couldn't keep up with the volume. It was the lack of structure that made them fall. So let's analyze 1 second this example under the RISE framework and see how a preventive risk assessment and risk management would have helped them avoiding this failure. Let's start from the strategic risk. Well, we can see that WowEV had 1,000 vehicles pre-order, so they had a good product market fit. They are selling something that people wanted. They had a unique product in the region, so they were okay under the competitiveness pillar, and they had clearly a quick sales ramp up. So even sales and marketing was very well covered. But what went wrong? If we move to the structural risk instead, we can see that something was not as strong as it should have been. Readiness and cash flow, that is the foundation part of the structural risk, was not very well covered. They ran out of money and they had to raise capital, diluting their shares and diluting their power over the business, and therefore they couldn't control anymore their operations. The repeatability of their process was not there. So building a few units or building 1,000 of vehicles need a certain level of SOPs, a certain level of repeatability to allow the operations to flow smooth. That was just not there. And then finally, under structural, they were lacking completely the capacity to grow. So the scalability part was not there. And if we move to human risk, we can find even more weaknesses. Well, they did have a major delay in ramping up the team. That came from the fact that they were trying to hire people when they were needed. And we all know it's not easy to find the right person at the right time. And therefore you have this lag between when you need someone and when you find that specific person that most of the time they can create problems. They had a very high failure rate at scale, so the quality pillar was actually extremely wobbly. So as we can see, if we have implemented the RISE framework beforehand, we would have found this kind of underlying risks and possibly identified a risk mitigation action that would have helped us to deliver the project. The idea of implementing a risk management framework into our scale-up project is to switch from being reactive into being proactive. What is the benefit of it? Well, by analyzing beforehand what the risks are in front of us, we will be able to plan resources, budget and time accordingly, and therefore our efficiency to fight the risk and minimize the consequences of that risk will be much lower. And bear in mind that risk management doesn't mean eliminating the risks. As business owners, we know that we need to take risks. What we don't want to happen is that those risks and the consequences of the worst case consequences, if the risk becomes real, wipe us out. It's a little bit like when we do trading, no? We don't look only, when we place a trade, we don't look only at our ROI, but we place a stop loss so that if things go south, let's say, we don't get wiped out from the business and we can keep playing again. So risk management, in a nutshell, allows us to take informed decisions and knowing and be prepared if things go wrong on how to react to them. Before closing this masterclass, I would like to leave the audience with maybe 3 questions that summarize the 3 risks that we have talked about. And answering those questions will help us identify whether or not we are ready to scale. First question would be, what happens if the demand triples overnight? Will I be able to meet those demands? Then, is my team ready to scale and structured enough to support the increased volume of operations? And last would be, am I scaling a proven offer or an assumption? Am I scaling just because I hope to get more profit, or do I have evidence that my product or service is actually needed in the market? I want to repeat one more time that risk management doesn't mean not taking risks. It means being able to take informed decisions and plan our reaction over the worst case scenario accordingly. Thank you so much for joining into this masterclass. I'm Marco Iannitto. I hope you enjoyed it.